All right, guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about this last KVK we're just in. So we ended up losing. I'll give a KVK recap. Just talk about some, thoughts, really opinions from my perspective. Obviously, different people, different kingdoms are going to have their opinions and thoughts on this. Right. So again, just want to, clarify. This is just my opinion. All right. This was a Diplo situation after the map that the map was revealed, and to be just really honest, this ally situation was pretty much dictated to us, right? So we're in Diplo. I was there to communicate some. I wasn't the main Diplo lead, but the kingdom with the highest KP on the map, 1592, over here in La Marche, and then the kingdom with the third highest KP on the map, 2203, they were pretty insistent on allying together and really weren't open to any other any scenario where they weren't allied together, right? And to be honest, we pushed back a little bit, but we didn't push back too hard because there was a challenge that we felt like we could take on. Okay, so maybe people have different opinions, but I was there. That's from my perspective, it's what kind of happened. We tried to present, us and Bourbon as allies. I was quickly shot down, and it just wasn't really entertained. Okay, so the Diplo situation coming out, you can see we're red, they're blue. We have more power, they have more KP. The most probably challenging part of this Diplo, in my opinion, was that we were surrounded by the two strongest camps, right, on their side. So it was something that we were expecting where we're going to have to fight one and then the other, or potentially both. And it largely dictated our strategy, right? If you guys have ever played Orleans, you also know us here, we're Auvergne on the bottom right, and Bourbon, we have to go to the right zone 6, right? And then Brittany and P2 could go to the left zone 6, but blue and purple can actually choose to go left or right. And that actually largely played into like the strategy we had to work, like we had to worry about going forward, okay? To be honest, we weren't sure if Picardy up north could actually get into this right zone 6 starting out, and we felt like it was very, very important for us to fully dedicate to blocking La Marche, right, which is to the left of us, out of that right zone 6. To do that, we're going to have to take both passes from them and then block it, and then set it up in a way where once we get into the right zone 6, we could actually still hold them off, because we felt like if they both got in there, it was pretty much GG, right? Because even if Picardy was able to get in there, it was 2v2 in there. La Marche, blue over here, still had the option to go left, and they were able to go left after things kind of stabilized here. We didn't feel like in a 2v2 situation, our two allies against red and blue in the left, they would actually be able to hold on to a pass, right? So like it was imperative that we block them out, okay? Some other stuff that added to the strategy, and this is literally some of the town hall we had, was that we quickly realized that we had completely offsetting uptime and downtime, right? They're mostly Asian, and then where US, we do actually have EU and that Asian time zone presence, but it's not our full uptime, right? And it's kind of spread out. And when that happens, you can really only lock in progress with forts, because you can make all this progress, burn a bunch of flags, build a bunch of flags, but if you don't have a fort down, then during your downtime, they just start burning you back, right? And then once you get 4 on 4 to kind of lock in the progress, it becomes a stalemate. Okay. Like I said earlier, our strategy was to prevent 1592 from getting into the zone 6, because if they got in there, we just felt like our chances of winning just goes down by even more. And also, we were anticipating having to fight a fresh La Marche, right? But then we're gonna have to fight a new fresh camp in zone 6. So after about 3 or 4 days, we ended up building a fort wall, right? So you can see from here where this yellow, we built a fort wall at top. We had to dedicate a lot of force to do this, and it's not so much that we needed this to just hold them off in this zone while we're here. It's that we needed this so when we're in the next zone, we could kind of man this fort wall, maybe reset it, move it back a little bit, but not have to full defend it, and then go find in the zone 6 and kind of try to play 2 fronts. It's not ideal. We had to fight a 3v1 last KVK. We knew, fighting on multiple fronts, this is really hard. But we just felt like, given the setup and the kind of how things played out, if we didn't block La Marche from getting into the right zone 6 until Kinsland opens, we probably didn't really have a chance to win. Okay, so you can see this dedicated a lot of forts, and that kind of set up the zone 5 fight, right? Here's the stats after the zone 5 fight. You can see overall the stats. I would say we're pretty happy with it, especially if you look at the power, right? So out of all the kingdoms here, by far we had the most power. And then 1592, like I said, had the highest KP on the map, right? You can even see here. We did gain about 10 bill more KP than them. But the biggest thing was that they actually lost more power than us in that zone, right? So we were feeling like, okay, we were about double their power, and they were losing about the same amount of power. They were also drained to a certain degree, and it was kind of obvious because, like, you know, their rallies were they're even garrison. You can see the farm troops like that were filling weren't necessarily doing the full even like 200k anymore. They kind of slowed pushing us the last like 3 days or so, and then a lot of their big players dropped a lot of that power in that zone. Doesn't mean we didn't also drop a lot, right? We essentially just kind of wore each other out. But this was the stats after the zone 5, and these are actually the stats overall for all the camps after zone 5. We're Auvergne, and then obviously us and La Marche. We just went at it for. The zone was 8 days. I would say we went at it for like about 6 days, like pretty hardcore, right? So you can see again, as a camp, we kind of outgained them in KP. They took more deads than us, so we were feeling pretty good about that. But it also didn't feel good because we weren't able to really make that much progress. They were still just sitting on us, right, with this fort wall, and we had to go into zone 6 with this like behind our backs, right? So that kind of sets up for zone 6. Okay, once we got into zone 6, I actually didn't have a picture anymore, but we still had the fort wall down here. But then we actually had to set up a fort wall up here to fight against a bourbon camp, right? Our allies weren't able to make it in. They're actually pink over here, and then blue is Brittany. So you can see they ended up setting up over here. It was essentially La Marche behind us, and then trying to fight bourbon. And this is where it started really wearing us out. In Orleans, you get auxiliary skills, right? Essentially, marches, rallies, and stuff get superpower. Once the second auxiliary skill opened with Attila Subutai, and for anyone that's in Orleans, Attila Subutai with Chandra Gupta's second skill for it's like a class exhaust. It made it extremely challenging because our garrisons, even in force, no longer held up to it one-on-one. Just nothing just held up to the Attila Subutai with that auxiliary skill. The only thing was if you had pure inf, and then you ran the new infantry garrison commander Tokugawa with Gorgo with pure inf. That one would trade about even, but everything else with Chandra's exhaust skill on Attila Subutai, it would just wear it out, right? So you could even try to hard stuff it with farm fillers, which at that point we're starting to feel a little stressed, like running lower, trying to rally and garrison with farm troops. The only other way is to just swarm it, right? So you let it hit, you swarm it, but then you trade really negatives, and it drains your speeds. And that's actually where we started having a lot of problems, because to defend up here, we needed like at least 5 more forts. And you can see down here with this fort wall, right, I showed you earlier, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 forts down here. It was just starting to really wear people out. And just to be like perfectly honest, every day it just seems like the morale is getting a little bit lower, the activity level would dwindle. We're still able to hold on for the first few days, but on the 4th day after zone 6 open, or like the 14th day of pretty much nonstop fighting, during the day activity was just much lower than even the day before. And then that night we try to actually reset this BS fort here, or it might have been this left one, and they just ping La Marche, just ping people, and they were able to just get way more people on when we were actually in our uptime, just overwhelm us in the field. And that was when we're just kind of like, okay, I think we're done as far as this KVK. We literally just kind of gassed out and worn out at the end. And this was actually the stats when KVK was over, right? You can see as a kingdom, we got the most kills, we got the most deads. Honestly, I feel like given the situation overall, we actually probably performed really well as a kingdom, based on kind of our profile starting out, right? We weren't the we weren't the highest KP kingdom. We weren't, we weren't necessarily like clearly so much better than everyone else. To actually be able to fight on like two different fronts and man that many touch points and hold out for that long, it was pretty good. But also, there is a lot of stuff that was like disappointing, right? And some of the more disappointing things is, kind of seeing how people react when things aren't going well, right? Our first two KVKs, there were points of adversity, but for the most part, we were strong enough, and we didn't really encounter a lot of adversity. Obviously, there's a lot of adversity this KVK, and there were some people where whether it's blaming others or blaming or labeling the kingdom as a whole, like, oh, like the whole kingdom is just like low activity. The whole kingdom, it's just not, simply not the case, right? There's good and bad. Could we have performed better? Of course. As a kingdom, did we perform pretty well overall given the circumstances? I feel like we did, but probably the most disappointing part for me was just some of the internal chatter seen from people. So, frankly, from some people I wasn't expecting. Now, on the other hand, there's a lot of people that also play like full out. They've really stepped up. A lot of people that honestly are like great war leads that stepped up when the situation needed it and even kept it going for 14 days. So overall, very disappointed. I think, it's easy when the KVK is over to just like feel like nothing was positive from this. There was actually some really good moments. We had one of like the most epic, like 4 drops and then builds. Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really, make a difference in the KVK, but it was still like a memory that I always have. A lot of people did step up far and beyond. This KVK itself was not your traditional KVK, right? Because when you have opposite downside, downtime, uptime, there isn't a lot of just like the ball up, field fight, and then like, push for a burn, right? Especially with these force and everything. A lot of it was actually, switching from one front to another, switching from one alliance in this coalition to another, bring your farms here or there. Like when I was war leading, and I think anyone that was war leading, it was very, very challenging because not only did I have to constantly switch accounts, like different alliances to promote people, to let people in, to drop markers, like switch captains, and then I also try to fill, but also it was just a lot of fronts. And whenever one thing was kind of stabilized and the other thing was kind of left unattended, right? Just because we had about 80 something people in our kingdom, and it's just a lot, right? Like what we were trying to do, you could probably pull off with maybe like 120 mains, and we had about 85. So, could we have done something different? Maybe. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything else that we could have done to maybe win this, just because this was clearly the most this is clearly like the option we had given like the circumstances, right? If our allies can't make it into the zone, then we also have to make sure that Lamarche for sure can't get into the zone, because they get into the zone, they could help out Bourbon and they could also still go to the left. I just don't know if there was another scenario I could think of that where we could have came up with like a different big picture strategy to end up winning this. All right, so what's next? Obviously, we're going to take some time to recover. Obviously, with every loss, there's some reshuffling. Some people will leave, and then we bring in some new migrants, and then we go on to the next KVK, right? But that's essentially what happened in this KVK. I'm not gonna lie. On Friday, after we couldn't go on anymore, I was completely burnt out. I felt completely burnt out. I actually wanted to make this video the last 2 days. Today is Sunday. Actually, I guess I just might want to make this video yesterday, but I couldn't even lie. Kind of just like focused enough to make it, right? So it does feel like I'm kind of rambling, but like after a day or two actually getting good sleep and not waking up to just things like being an emergency everywhere and then having to stabilize, I do feel like a lot more relaxed now. So that's it for now. Again, thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you guys next time.